This king is a dictator. He gives capital punishment to anyone who steals. His name is King Opata. King Opata was from a distant African village. He was a wicked king who ruled with an iron fist, using force to seize lands from the villagers. His cabinet was filled with equally cruel individuals who would take any land they desired simply by informing the king. The people of the village suffered from poverty and hunger as their livelihood was taken away. To make matters worse, this king imposed a law forbidding theft with a harsh penalty of death for those who dared to steal. A poor man who had lost his land and had 3 hungry children to feed decided to pluck some cassavas from his former plot, which had been taken by one of the king's cabinet members. He was caught and brought before King Opata. The desperate man pleaded, explaining that his land had been forcibly taken and that his children were starving. However, the king remained adamant and ordered the man's execution. The poor man met a tragic end. An elderly childless woman in the village, who was also a victim of King Opata's cruelty, whom her only son was sentenced to death for picking a mango from someone else's farm. She despised the king for rendering her childless and living in constant pain. Years passed. The poor man's children were raised by the compassionate old woman. The eldest son, who had grown into a strong young man called Emek, understood injustice committed against his father. The old woman proposed a plan to make the king pay for his actions and unite the villagers against him. One day, the elderly woman approached the king, offering Emek as his grandson to be his servant, hoping that by being close to the king, they could eventually bring him down. The king accepted and Emek began serving in the palace. Meanwhile, the king's own children were mischievous. They were stealing, despite having all the riches their father had collected. In the palace, Emek began conversing with like-minded individuals, forming a secret alliance to overthrow the king. One day, Emek discovered the king's biggest secret, which was known only to the king and his corrupt cabinet. They were stealing from the villagers' natural resources, the very resources that were meant to be beneficial to the entire community. These resources was used to power trains and ships, and it was only found in that village. Yet the villagers remained in the dark about the natural resources and the exploitation. A day arrived when the king's own son was caught stealing, and the villagers were fed up with the king's hypocrisy. They gave the king 2 conditions: uphold his decree to execute all thieves, including his son, or save his son and step down from the throne. Surprisingly, the wicked king chose the throne over his son's life. When Emek saw the anger written all over the villager's face, he knew it was the right moment to take action. He revealed the king's theft in front of the furious crowd, asking how the king and his cabinet could be above the law when they were stealing from the village. The villagers turned on the king and his corrupt cabinet. They beat them and stripped off the king's crown. They banished them from the palace and crowned the brave young man Emek as their new king. Lands that had been taken by force were returned to their rightful owners, and the wealth from the natural resources was used to build homes for everyone in the village. The once poverty-stricken and suffering community became the most prosperous and beautiful village in the world, drawing visitors far and wide. King Emek ruled with fairness and compassion, bringing happiness to once oppressed villagers. This village, once disfigured by the wicked King Opata, had transformed into a paradise where dreams come true for all who were fortunate enough to belong. The end.